All right, what's going on, Freight Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Freight Nation, a truck stop podcast. At Freight Nation, we're here to bring the stories about freight transportation and trucking alive for you to hear and to enjoy. So, thanks for joining us today. If whether you're watching or whether you're listening, we appreciate you just listening along. And we hope our goal is in producing this podcast is for you to learn something, learn a story about somebody else's adventure into logistics and how they created success or are creating success. And you can benefit from that. And you can figure out what your pathway is going to be. And because the one great thing about transportation is there's opportunity for everybody to create what they want. And today's guest is one of those people that is the new sort of the new blood in the marketplace of creating a new thing. And he entered into the marketplace, got some experience into it, then created something on his own because he saw an opportunity out there that could fit his goals and what he wanted for his adventure into transportation. So joining us today is the president and founder, I know you've heard of it before, FreightCaviar, Mr. Paul Bernard Jaroslawski. So Paul, thanks for joining us today on Freight Nation.
Thank you, Brent, for having me. You actually pronounced my last name correctly, which I'm shocked by. So good job on that. But yeah, definitely looking forward to being on this show, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Well, hey, these the pronunciations of names is important because I always congratulate people when they actually get my last name correct. It's Hutto. Now, I get it. I get all kinds of things, and I know you do too. So, but I did business in the Japanese market for a bunch of years, and pronunciation of names in the Japanese market is very honorable. So, I just wanted to honor your name and honor so just so Freight Nation, just so you know, there's a little bit of an international flair today because Paul's joining us from his office in Poland and which is super cool. The greatest thing about the internet is the world is flat today. And we've all benefited from it. And so Paul, again, thanks for joining us, and I'm looking forward to just you telling the Freight Nation watchers and listeners. Just really about your story and everything. So you got a really, really cool story. So, I said young blood in the beginning because Paul's you're 30 years old. And so you're sort of the new part of what's going on inside transportation. There's a lot of participants, men and women like yourself, that are beginning to find their way on what transportation is going to mean to them and how you're going to move transportation forward. So I love for the Freight Nation watchers and listeners, I love for them to hear where you started, how you got into transportation. So tell that story.
So my start in logistics transportation occurred in 2015. I had just graduated college. I went to U of I in Urbana-Champaign. So I grew up in Chicago, born and raised. My parents were just immigrated Poland in 1988, but I was born in the States, did all my schooling here, or I guess there. And in 2015, I graduated U of I. I was a psych degree and I had a bachelor's degree. So I was planning on getting a master's, but I went to the career fair because I don't want to get any more student loans. So I was like, I'll see what's out there. And while I was at the career fair, I ran into my fraternity brother who was there with Trek Freight Services. Trek Freight was a brokerage out of Lincolnwood, Illinois. They got acquired by Becker Logistics a year and a half ago, or maybe 2 years ago. So that was in 2015. And he's like, Paul, you should come work for my dad. And so, I easily got the job as a freight broker working at Trek Freight Services in 2015. And to my advantage, I knew Polish, and no one else in the office knew Polish. So all the Polish trucking companies out of Chicago, and there's a lot of them, I had built up relationships with them, and they all like always reached out to me. They always I was their Polish guy, the Polish broker. So I didn't expect learning Polish as a young kid and going to Polish school every Saturday to be advantageous as I grew older, but actually it helped me make more money because I was selling more freight. But I ended up being at Trek for a year, and after that year, I was actually considering going to do my master's degree in psychology. I was kind of like overwhelmed a little bit. It was a lot of work, a lot of stress too. But so I traveled for half a year and I came home broke.
You came home broke, so you came home motivated.
Exactly. I had no other choice. So I had like $35 in my bank account, but it was nice because I knew someone at CS Recruiting, which is Charlie Safra's recruiting company, and Charlie's she's on LinkedIn. Yeah, so I knew someone at CS Recruiting, and I had reached out to them, and they got me 4 job offers in 4 days. So I ended up going with Everest Transportation Systems out of Evanston, Illinois, back in 2017. It was just 7 guys in a small office in Evanston back then. And then after 10 months, they asked me if I wanted to move to Ukraine to open up like an outsourcing operation for them. It would just be for the US operation, but outsourced in Ukraine. And I was 24, single at the time. I love traveling. I'm like, of course, like, yeah, send me. I'll go to Ukraine. So I ended up moving to Ukraine in November 2017, and I lived there for 3 years. After that, I ended up quitting in November of 2020, and I moved to Poland. And then that's when I started doing Freight Caviar. It was literally just a random idea I had. There was really no thought process behind it. I just started making memes on Instagram.
Right. All right. We're going to jump into freight caviar in a minute, but I want to talk. I want to back up. I want to back up a step because you mentioned something the mother of invention, which is you came home broke. So, I want you, and look, I'm sure there's tons of people listed today at Inside of Transportation that is the motivator. I know it was one of the motivators for me in my life, which is, I better get serious if I wanna eat, you know what I mean, about life, so, and also, so I want you to talk a little bit about that, and then talk a little bit about psychology because I'm all and I was a I studied psychology for 1 year in college, and I think everybody ought to study psychology because it's the human condition, right? We're all studying the human condition and how that helps you. So talk a little bit about coming home broke, but all that, and then talk a little bit about how your psychology experience has helped you in business because I think that's fascinating.
That's a good question. In terms of being broke, it was kind of funny. Like the first day I was at Everest, like my boss needed like my account information for bank information so they could, set up my payroll. And I was so embarrassed because I logged in and he just saw my account. There's like $35. So he's like, it's like, this is why the guy wanted the job. But so, I mean, it was definitely motivated. And my parents were immigrants. So like, they still live paycheck to paycheck. It was just, I grew up in a very diverse community in Chicago, but I traveled the world a lot. My dad used to work for an airline. So I used to travel, like standby for like literally just really cheap all around the world. So I was still so grateful because like when I traveled to like third world countries, I was like, wow, like I literally just won the lottery by being born in the U.S. And I think a lot of people take that for like they don't respect the fact that maybe they not respect it, but they don't actually like realize how like amazing it is to be born in the U.S. And I noticed that, and even though like my parents came from like like it was a tough like economic situation at home. Um, it was like it was still just amazing to be born in the U.S. and have so much opportunity. But so like I mean I just went to work and I started working a lot at Everest. Started making good money and can't complain. But in terms of psychology, I guess that's the question. Psychology wise, it's funny because in college you have like all these textbooks, you're reading all these books, and then after like 10 years, you think back and you're like I don't even know what I remember, So like obviously you pick up on some things and like it's helped me a lot. What I do have to say is that I read this book that was written by a work psychologist. This was when I was just moved to Ukraine, and it was like on the various differences in work culture in different countries. And I had to like learn about this because like working in Ukraine is a little bit different than working in the US. Yeah, so that book, I forgot what it was called, but it was phenomenal. And in terms of psychology wise, like it definitely has helped me kind of understand, like myself better. And just like my family does like have some history of like mental illness as well. So like just kind of like grasping with that fact and kind of like understanding where that came from, or maybe like the factors that might have caused that. But overall, like it definitely helped me understand myself better and kind of just operate better in the world. And so like if I compare myself now to back then, I'm just a completely different person.
Well, I love that. I love the statement. So here's a couple takeaways for Nation watchers and listeners. So is that so Paul's experience where he's in college and he's learning psychology and he's learning things I love what you said. I don't even if I know I don't, you said I don't even know if I know what I remembered. So which I thought was funny, but it's so true that you take all those experiences and the reason I wanted you to talk about psychology for a second, Paul, is that the most diverse, complicated thing to understand is the human being, and then it's hard to understand yourself, and then you gotta understand yourself and understanding others, and so Freight Nation watchers and listeners, this is super important. I mean, we you're negotiating every day for freight to move freight back and forth. inside our economy, United States work, and the global economy work as well. And so understanding that dynamic and understanding another person, even their culture. So I appreciate Paul bringing that out about, and Paul, tell me what you talk about this for a second too, because this is fascinating. That you were talking about. Okay, so you were of a Polish family, born in the United States. I love how you say you won the lottery because most people don't realize how much benefit and opportunity we have in the United States. It's everywhere. So, but and how you were able to take that sort of understanding to create opportunity for yourself when you were in Ukraine, but also when you were trying to move freight in your first job in Chicago, but how all that dynamic and understanding the culture helps you create success. So talk a little bit before we jump into Freight Caviar and your super great endeavor and everything, because one thing about Freight Nation we always talk about is what are you learning through the process? How do you take in someone's experience and learning from that? So talk a little bit about the dynamic of understanding another person's personality. That's one thing, and then their culture that reflects their person. So talk a little bit about that and what you learned that you applied that you would want to teach somebody else.
I do wanna just, I guess, begin that, like, every year for me is like attending college, and I especially ever since I became an entrepreneur, and it's like year 4 now, which I can't believe. I feel like I'm a senior in college in the world of entrepreneurship. It just you learn so much every year and every week. You pick up on things uh, and it's like, okay, it's like I'm getting a business degree, but instead of going to college, I'm actually like practicing it in real life. Um, but in terms of like just relationships and like culturally, psychologically speaking, I mean, my knowing Polish for me was such an advantage because everyone that spoke Polish wanted to like, or all the Polish trucking companies, they wanted to work with me. So right off the bat, there was like that trust factor. Oh, you speak Polish, I speak Polish, we have the same background. Yeah, huge. And I think to translate this like to our audience like listening right now, like you know, it's first of all, if you have some kind of like background from like another country, maybe not the United States, like definitely find out someone that has a similar background to you and try to work with them. It's gonna be there's like a trust component, like you kind of you want to talk to that person. You have similar probably like maybe hobbies or personality traits, and I think it's important overall. Like, let's say like background aside, is to definitely build relationships with people that you enjoy. Like we go through life, and it's like we're all gonna be dead in some time. It's like there's people out there that are amazing people, whether it's on the brokerage side, trucking side, and it's like definitely like I forgot. I think this is Charlie Munger. I'm currently reading his book.
Charlie Munger, who worked with Warren Buffett.
Exactly, yeah, who just passed away unfortunately a few months ago. But it's I think it's Charlie's Almanac. I forgot the book. I have it somewhere here. But he kind of in like early on, he basically said like he will only work with people that he like, wants to have like good relationships with, like, and he gets like a long term relationships with.
Hey, amen to that. I believe in that 100%. Yeah.
And I think it's like in life, it's so much better just to simplify things. People like to overcomplicate certain endeavors, especially maybe like relationships. It's like, who do you actually like working with? Who do you trust? Who do you like? And if you're a trucking company, like maybe you could recall that broker that you had like a really good load with. Like call them up, like try to see if you could work more with them. Same on the broker side. And I think like what helped me a lot was definitely the relationships that I built, and a lot of them were Polish trucking companies, but there were so many more American-based trucking companies that it was just that we just had a good relationship.
So you talked about culturally and your experience with understanding. Look, language is important. All right. And when you speak somebody else's language, especially fluently, boy, there's commonality and trust really quick. So Freight Nation watchers and listeners, man, that is so key. And so language like English or Polish or the different that's one thing. Understanding somebody's personality is another thing. So that was another part of the question to you, Paul, was when you're talking to somebody and you're really thinking psychologically about their personality. I'm an extrovert. Okay. Sometimes I can overwhelm the introverts. I've learned over my 50 plus years that I got to bring my emotion down a little bit when I'm talking to people that I can perceive are introverts, whether it's virtually or whether it's face to face. Face to face, I have to come down even further because of my personality. And so understanding that helps you navigate business more. So talk a little bit about that, Paul, and kind of like your psychological background, how you've applied that to your relationships in business.
So I'm actually more of an introvert myself. I kind of just I'm a pretty cool guy. I'm just kind of chill, laid back. I have like a few close friends. I never really liked to party, so never was a party person. But at the same time, like I think there's this misconception like that people think, oh, like you need to be like an extrovert to do good in sales. Uh, but it's like, yeah, you just got to find your people. I think it might take me a little bit longer just to maybe think about like the way like personalities might like affect the relationship, and also how do you like discover a personality. What I've learned through my time is, face to face always beats, like digital connections. So like I did a lot of like visiting of trucking companies around Chicago whenever I had the opportunity, especially the companies I worked with often. And that was just huge because then you go back to the office and that relationship on the phone is completely different. You're like, you already have some like maybe talking points about the visit, or there's just you had a closer relationship then. And I realized every time I would visit a trucking company that my relationship was so much better afterwards. And when I would call them, it was just like so much more fun to talk to them.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, hey, Freight Nation, listen to what Paul just said. He went in person to meet people. So here's a huge pro tip, Freight Nation watchers and listeners, is people do business with people they like, they know, and they trust. And it's a whole lot easier to develop those things when you go see them face to face and in person. So whether you're a carrier, whether you're a truck, whether you're a small owner operator out there, or a carrier, go see the broker. Brokers invite your carriers to come see you because boy, does it make business a whole lot better. All right, before we shift into Freight Caviar, I got to ask you one very important question. How many times have you called your mom and dad and said, thank you for putting me into the Polish school on Saturdays because how it's helped me in my career?
I love that you brought that up, Brent, because it was honestly such a hassle to wake every Saturday. Like all my friends are now waking up; they're just sleeping in, and I had to go. And honestly, like I've told them many times since then, I'm like, this has helped me so much in my job, and I never knew it would.
So yeah, so parents' wisdom is really important, and I know as an adult, I've thanked my parents over and over about just all the things that I thought they were forcing me to do, but they were really saying, "Hey, son, this will benefit you," So super important. Every Freight Nation, go out and thank your mom and dad for not killing you and for giving you good things in life that help you out. So all right, so Paul, let's shift into Freight Caviar, all right? So that's a public entity. It's a media business, so you're communicating to the public marketplace. So there was a time though that you were sitting there, trying to figure things out, working in the brokerage part of the marketplace, but you're trying to figure things out. Where was that? What was that time like where you said you kind of got to the point where you said, nope. I'm gonna give that up, and I'm gonna launch this thing that I've just got this burning desire to do because that's entrepreneurship, Then instead of say small trucking companies, entrepreneurs, brokers, entrepreneurs. So where was that moment that you said, I think I can do this?
So this is interesting because I never intended Freight Caviar to be a business when I started it. Basically, I quit. I quit my job at Everest back in October of 2020, and the next day I was at the gym, and I was actually in the process of opening my own brokerage. And so, like, I had a few weeks in between then where I was like, I literally was at the gym, and I just had this idea. I was like, I'm gonna start making freight memes. And before this, there was like accounts like USA Transportation, Detention Denied, I Hate Freight, all these accounts that like me and my like colleagues at work would always be laughing at. And it was literally just a spur of the moment decision. I was at the gym. I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get 10,000 followers in 10 months. And that was like my whole mindset. I opened up the brokerage and I had one customer. We were moving a couple loads per week. But in the meantime, all I did was just spend time on Instagram the whole like literally like day by day. And I ended up getting 10,000 followers in 10 months. And I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool. And then I ended up getting a few sponsors, like shout out to Text Locate and Ascent TMS. They were like the early sponsors, the first ones that kind of like were like, okay,
Ron and Tim are good guys.
yeah, exactly. They're like, Paul, you have this audience on Instagram. Like, this was just when Text Locate started. This was August of 2021. Ryan just launched the app and he reached out to me. He slid into like our DMs on Instagram and he was wondering if we could, help him promote Text Locate. And at that time, I literally was like, Ryan, like, honestly, like, I'll promote you for free as long as you could just mentor me, like, help me out a little bit. Um, Yeah, great guy. I talk to Ryan all the time. I'm talking to him tomorrow. But yeah, and he literally just, you know, took me and like kind of was like, Paul, like you could turn this into a business. Like this could be like you could just get sponsors, like, you know, like, and like you could turn this into a company. And it definitely sparked like this idea where I was like, okay, like, you know, this could be definitely bigger than it is right now. At that point, we're just on Instagram. And so I just started posting that on LinkedIn. And then a few memes went viral on LinkedIn, which blew up our account, which was great. But October of 2021 was like the time where we had this audience, and I was like, okay, what else could we do? And so we started a podcast back then in October 2021. And then I started a newsletter. The reasoning behind that was because I used to read the Morning Brew, and I still read the Morning Brew every day. It's like a business digest newsletter, 5 minutes to kind of get an idea of what's going on in the world. And as a freight broker, I would always read that. I always enjoyed it. It was like kind of like the way I started my morning. But I was like, it'd be great to have that, but for freight and logistics, just to kind of understand what's going out in our industry. So that's when I started a newsletter, and you know, it took some iterations and some time to actually get up to where it is now. We just crossed 10,000 subscribers last week, which is like a huge feat for me. But that was kind of like the beginnings, and it was still kind of slow. But then I took it like full time, kind of like mid 2022 was when I was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do full time. And then I met Christian, who's my co-founder now, and we co-founded Shipper CRM, and we're backed by Triumph and Tim from Ascend TMS. So it kind of evolved like this idea. Like I didn't just start one day with like a business plan. I was like, this is going to be a business. It just kind of, you know, became what it is through content and my time being spent on social media to where it is today.
Well, that's fascinating. So, all right, so you made the decision, you got your 10,000 followers. I'm sure, like, so I want to talk about the business of this, of running a media platform, because I think this is fascinating. And so one thing, Freight Nation watchers and listeners, this is super important. So Paul had an opportunity because the ability to distribute his content all changed when the internet came about. And so there's all these giant distribution channels. And how are you like leveraging your brand and what you would like to do in the market on this sort of free distribution that's out there? So it's not necessarily free because it takes time, effort, energy to do it. But that's what's fascinating to me. So the power of distribution when it comes to the internet is the greatest thing we've seen, you know, in all of our generations so far when it comes to launching a product in a business. And so I just think that's really neat because you brought that up about how you were able to leverage that to get to 10,000 people following you. That's an amazing thing. So, all right. So you got Freight Caviar launched. We got another endeavor, which we'll talk about. So the very, very last of the product, the Shipper CRM. So we'll talk about that in the very end. But so I always like for entrepreneurs to talk about, you know, how easy it's been to start your own business, how everything went your way. There was never a problem. Yeah, that's not the way it goes. So talk a little bit about the struggles and the things like you had to like think differently about or overcome or deal with. Talk a little bit about that because that's really some of the keys that I like for our Freight Nation watchers and listeners to really take away from these podcasts.
Well, so I've learned a lot. I mean, it's actually, I would honestly say the best thing about being an entrepreneur is the knowledge you gain. Like, because like once it's gained, you're gonna have it for the rest of your life. And I have to say, like, I could give you some more context here. So when I left Everest in October 2020, I opened up a brokerage. I also opened up like a restaurant in Poland. It was like I opened like a small like fast food, like American food restaurant Poland. Yeah, I had that open operating for a year and a half until I closed it down. I was working as an agent for a company out of Texas, and then I was also there was this other partner that I had that wanted to open up another brokerage because she thought that she could get a lot of clients for it and just outsource it all to Poland. And I was like, I could do all of these four projects at once, no problem at all. Like I'm capable of it. And then after one by one, everything just started falling apart. Besides FreightCaviar, and honestly, FreightCaviar was the one where I was like most passionate about. I didn't like running a brokerage. Honestly, running a brokerage, people think it's easy. It's like really difficult. There's so many nuances that goes into running a brokerage. And then like it's you're essentially operating as a bank for these shippers a lot of the times, unless it's a smaller shipper. But like these larger shippers like are just you know paying you within 90 to 120 days. It's just it's a painful process. And so I kind of realized I'm like, I had this conception. I was like, oh, I'm gonna own a brokerage. I'm gonna make a lot of money. I'll sell the brokerage eventually, you know. And then I was like, okay, that's not how I want my life. That just sounds painful and awful. It's like I want to like kind of live my life now the way I would love to live my life, even in 10 years. Maybe like I'll change a few things, but overall, like it's like how do I get that? And so that was like the first kind of like I guess part of kind of realizing like the maturity. That was like after year one, I was a freshman year one, and then year two becoming a sophomore. I was like, okay, trying time to get more focused um, on one thing and just focus on one thing. But overall, like there's definitely a lot of difficulties, especially in like running a media company. I've never run a media company before. I don't even know like what exactly is a media company. It's like okay, and how do you price things? How do you get customers to sponsor your stuff, and then how do you show them ROI and provide them analytics? And so luckily I saved up enough money before I had left Everest to where I had a nice cushion to where I could experiment, because I think if you don't have that cushion, like I would have been back at a job within a year for sure. I would have been okay. I'm broke again. Time to get another job.
That cushion's called operating capital there. Freight Nation.
I would call it also R&D, research and development.
Sure, all of it. Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into it, and so in terms of like getting Freight Caviar up to speed, getting actually to like being like a business. Like we have people out here in Poland that help me with it. We have a great writer, Adriana. We have amazing social media managers. Like we have a group of 5 now, and it's like okay, obviously we need to get paid. We need customers, but it's also like building a relationship with your customers. It's like okay, like how do we improve this? And it's not like something that happens in one day or in a week. You have to like continuously, I'm continuously reading business books, listening to business podcasts. I'm continue writing down notes. I have a journal where I have like all my thoughts and ideas and kind of like my priorities. But there's just so much focus and concentration that has to go into like one thing, like an entity, in order for it to be successful. And I don't get when people say like, "Oh, I opened up as a side hustle a trucking company." It's like what does that even mean? Like unless you have like a full time like operator at that business, like there's no way you could have a side hustle of a trucking company or like any business for that matter. I think it's really difficult. You can make a few $1,000s maybe per month, but it's not going to be that successful. So it's like being focused and concentrated is definitely something like a huge takeaway. And then like building the relationships, finding the people you want to work with, and actually like just focusing on them. And I like what I've been grasping with lately, or what I've been kind of like really trying to teach myself, is to be more patient, because things take time. And like I was, I guess, typically kind of like an impatient person. Like I kind of wanted results quickly. And it's like what I got away from this podcast I listened to last week, it's like thinking 10-year time frames. It's like the Japanese even I think thinking 100-year time frames about your life. It's like how are you gonna go through life? If I think instead of like doing a 1 year or 1 month time frame, I'm thinking 10 years. Like, is today a successful day if I think in a 10-year time frame? It's a lot better like to be maybe easier on yourself, but also like more understanding, like in 10 years, like this is going to be great, or within 10 years this is all going to work out. Maybe today was a rough day, but overall like there's a lot more days to come. So there's a lot of takeaways, and yeah, running a business is difficult. And I honestly think if I were to go back and work for someone right now, it'd be life on easy mode. Like life would just be like so much easier, but I wouldn't have that independence and the freedom that I'm like, this is mine. I'm building something that's my own. And I think that's beautiful, especially since we have this one life. It's like let's build something. I'm not here to like make a ton of money. Like, sure, money's amazing. Don't get me wrong. I want to make a lot of money, but that's like secondary to like having that freedom and independence. And then going back to Charlie Munger also said that he just like when he was a young kid, or not a young kid, but just starting out as an entrepreneur, like his main goal was just independence and freedom. He didn't want to go work for someone. He didn't want to be stuck to like specific hours. Like if I wanted to catch a plane right now to the Philippines, I could do that and I could still work. And funny enough, my friend is actually flying from Warsaw to the Philippines today, and he asked me if I wanted to fly with him. He's also an American living in Poland, so just funny insight there.
Well, super good story about your experience on that, and I love it because I know that the Freight Nation watchers and listeners will take away a lot from that. I think a couple things I took away from this. Number one is you talked about maturing. You talked about what comes with maturing is patience. Is like understanding that you can continue to move forward even when things aren't necessarily going your way that day. That's a great thing. And I love what you said about focus and concentration on one thing. All right. You guys, and I'll bring this back to you, Paul. Psychology, you know this in psychology, the human brain doesn't focus on multiple things at the same time very well. And people talk about this all the time. They say, "Oh, I can multitask." That is the quickest way to an average return at best. So if you really want to be excellent and great at something, Freight Nation, this is great advice from Paul. Put your focus and your concentration on one thing and do it over and over and over again. What soup? That's fantastic advice, Paul. Fantastic advice. All right, so let's talk. Let's talk. So thank you for that wise counsel for the Freight Nation to watch. I appreciate that. Super good. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Freight Caviar. Then we'll swap into sort of what you guys are thinking about for continue to grow the enterprise. All right, so as you were building it, so you said I've never owned a media company. I didn't even know what it was about. So what were some of the things, the operational things that you guys did that you found success in as you continue to build it out? Because I mean, you talked about just kind of as like a fun platform to just kind of like inform the brokerage industry, inform the carrier marketplace, inform the transportation marketplace. So, but I'm sure as you develop some of those things kind of continue to iterate and change. So, talk a little bit about how you started building Freight Caviar's ability to deliver great quality to your watchers and listeners.
So luckily, I would have to say that we had an influx of companies reaching out to us to sponsor us because we were putting out a lot of content. A lot of the content was doing great. People were reaching out to us, like, which was very, very fortunate for me because I didn't have to do a lot of outbound sales or cold calling where people had no idea where we were. It's like, why are we going to sponsor someone that we don't know? So I would say, like, first off, like, creating content is a blessing when it comes to sales, and we definitely that helped a lot in terms of like getting sponsors on board. And then once we had the sponsors on board and we had them featured in our newsletter or podcast, a lot of them saw like the amount of leads they would receive from just being promoted, especially since our audience keeps growing. They keep getting the spotlight. And a lot of the companies that we work with in terms of sponsors typically are freight tech companies. There's also freight factoring, Otero Solutions that we work with as well. But typically they're freight tech companies because a lot of our audience is freight brokers. So we were kind of fortunate in being able to kind of figure that out along the way where we're like, okay, we have this newsletter. There's ad slots here. Let's put a customer here. Let's put a customer there. And then like kind of like get some, maybe feedback from our customer and overall see how it goes. But a lot of our customers have been with us for a long period of time because we provided good value and they get leads from us. So that's one thing. Well, the second part of the question was, I think, Brent, can you?
Well, as you began to continue to iterate your business, so you found something that was successful. Okay, what if we did this? So the sort of iteration of business that you're developing, testing, and then implementing into your platform. That's not easy because everything you do is public.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. And sometimes I wish it wasn't all public, but I mean, that's how we operate as a media company. Overall, I definitely have realized that at the end of the day, like quality is the most important. Like, you could try to put out as much content as you want. And like at the end of the day, like I do recommend for people to post a lot of content because you never know what's going to do well. And I kind of realized that as well. Like put out a lot of content, like maybe on social media, like social media is very forgivable when it comes to like, one does well, one post does well, the other post might not do so well, etc. But you really don't know what content will do well until you start posting. So, but when it comes to like the newsletter, and like I had this like thought, I was like, well, if we increase our newsletters to 5 times a week, we could, increase our revenue by 40% because we're basically sold out of slots for our primary ad slot until August.
You need inventory.
Yeah, exactly. Create inventory. But then I was like, well, that would dilute the quality of our newsletter. It's like, I mean, I don't know how I could put out a daily newsletter and actually have it where people actually want to click it and open it every day. So maybe I will be able to figure that out. And if I do, that'd be amazing because then we could increase our revenues. But for the time being, I'm like, okay, let's focus on quality. And something that I actually just I'm working on this week, Brent, I actually wanted to talk to you about this. Apart from this, is that we're going to be bringing on or capping our sponsors at 13. We're bringing on 13 sponsors, and we want to do like a long-term relationship with every single one of them, and honestly, just be focused solely on them. Where will they'll see like where, first of all, we're a small company, so I don't want to bring on too many customers and then provide lower quality service. And there is something I saw on LinkedIn today from Nick Dangles saying how like people like a lot of brokers just bring on as many customers as they can, and then they realize they can't really service them that well, and that's a problem, right? Because then the customer doesn't want to work with you anymore. So it's like where like and I've kind of embraced this recently, where it's like I rather grow slowly but like really effectively and actually have really good relationships with my customers versus trying to grow as fast as I can, every year. And like I've seen companies that do that and I feel like it never ends well. It's like and people want to always make more money and so they'll do anything for it. But then it's like you end up making more money in 10 years if you grow slowly but more effectively and have everything in place with the people in place, provide good quality, have good relationships versus trying to grow really fast in, a couple years. Within 10 years, you will grow faster if you grow slower now and actually like slowly get into things. And so I think one of like building on the topic of patience, I'm like embracing just like really slower growth, but actually having really good relationships with each and one of my customers and sponsors. So I guess that's like the aspect that's like that I've been kind of trying to like really hone in on. And it's like, okay, we don't need 5 newsletters now because the quality's gonna be bad. People won't like them. Let's stick to 3 because 3 is good. It's the perfect number. And how can we serve our sponsors with 3 newsletters a week? And how can we grow as a company? So
So here I'm writing things down because you're giving great advice. So you're giving, I like to call them pro tips. So how do you apply all this what you just said? Because you're a media company, people go, well, he's a media company. How do I apply that to my trucking business or my brokerage business? Well, I love what you said about quality matters. All right, quality matters no matter what it is. If you're a carrier, quality matters. How well are you servicing the customer from a standpoint of on-time delivery? How are you helping them have a better relationship with their customers, the shipper that you're bringing those goods to if you're a trucking company? On the brokerage end, how well are you developing the quality of which you're dealing with the relationships with the carriers you're working with? All these things matter, and I love what you said about the long term. The long term always matters. It's almost in a from a human standpoint, there's two types of mindsets. There's a Western mindset, which is what we have in the United States. Fast, 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 get it done right now. There's an Eastern mindset. Take your time, be thoughtful about it, understand the long game. In other words, how's it going to be in 5 years? Because you said you always measure yourself like in a 10-year gap. Now, in other words, what's it going to be like in 10 years? So these things matter. You were talking about long-term quality and long-term relationships. And I tell you, I think that's so smart because no matter what you're doing, whether you're running a trucking company, whether you're running a brokerage company, Freight Nation, you've got to make sure you're focused on quality and on long-term relationships because those things, as you work on long-term relationships, the repetitiveness on that has the lowest cost because you can work quickly because the relationship, the communication is a lot faster. And I love what you said about not bringing on too many clients at one time because it's a lot harder it's a lot more expensive to bring on new ones than it is to service the ones you've got and create great quality with them. So that's fantastic, man. So that is, and I'm telling you, Freight Nation, this is such great advice to you. So take these things down and listen about how Paul has grown Freight Caviar. Now, Grant, he comes from a mindset of working as a brokerage company, right? He also comes from a mindset of a family that made sacrifices to create a future for their family here in the United States. So all these things work towards how Paul's bringing Freight Caviar to success.
and this is something that I've realized, and maybe it took me a while to realize this, but there's so much noise out there, especially when you go on social media and you see all these companies and they're like bragging about how much they've grown in a year or how many employees they have, or there's just so much all this noise that could deconcentrate you and make you think, oh no, I gotta grow faster. Like, but at the end of the day, like you gotta like mute that noise and just focus on like that one customer and that one load, whatever it may be. And because a lot of that stuff is like honestly fake. People lie on social media all the time. They exaggerate. It's just not true. It's like just focus on what you have in front of you and like mute, like turn off all that noise. I just wanted to add that.
No, I'm glad you did. Focus, persistence, and determination is what creates success. Go read the quote from our president, Calvin Coolidge, back many years ago. Focus and persistence and determination wins out every single time. All right, so I want to shift to the last couple of minutes we've got here. I want to shift to every business needs to continue to focus on new opportunities. So you guys, when you said you partnered with Christian, who brought in, now he's now your co-partner there in working on the Freight Caviar, but he brought a new opportunity. I don't want to say I don't want to talk deeply about the product, but just about what it means in a business to continue to have new opportunities. So you guys you partnered with Christian, you brought in Shipper CRM, which is a great opportunity. But talk about why you brought that in, and then what that helps from the standpoint of the sort of future of the business.
Sure. So it's actually I should have maybe brought this up earlier about like the impact of like the powerful impact of having like a media business is when you have an audience, it's like you could really sell anything then. I mean, if I wanted to start, let's say, yeah, it's distribution. At the end of the day, like, everyone is trying to market their companies and have the world know about them. But it's like when you have a list of companies that already know you and people that know you, especially in this industry, it's a lot easier to actually start something. And I know that Craig Fuller from FreightWaves often mentions like the negative customer acquisition costs that FreightWaves has for the sonar business because yeah, and I think you know back in August of 2022, FreightCaviar was still relatively maybe not new. It was 2 years after I had started it, but it was with the newsletter probably had like I don't know 1,000 subscribers. And that's kind of the thing that I mostly focus on nowadays. And but it was like okay, like we had this audience, and I was talking to a few people that were like, Paul, like you should just like partner with like a tech guy and just create like some application for the industry. And like back then I was like, yeah, that's like unbelievable, amazing idea. Like that sounds so easy. Like partner with a tech guy. I have this audience. We'll just sell it to them. Perfect. And then you kind of realize like there's a lot of complexities and nuances that goes into building a tech company. Every business is difficult. Obviously, there's different rankings. I would say that owning a restaurant is probably the most difficult and never open up a restaurant. I hear that a lot from I learned that the hard way, but like you can learn from my mistakes. But when it comes to like the tech side, like there's a funny meme out there that says like we don't do this because it's easy. We do this because we thought it was going to be easy. And honestly, like it's true, but like at the same time, like it was really it's crazy when I think about now, like if I were to tell myself 5 years ago that in 5 years I would be a co-founder of a SaaS product and a co-founder of a media company, I wouldn't believe it. And it just sometimes it's difficult, and like I like doing that like kind of test where it's like literally 5 years ago I would have been like, there's no way this is going to happen. But we ended up launching Shipper CRM. It took a little bit longer to build than we had originally planned for it. We like officially launched it last month. We're backed by Triumph Pay and by Tim Hyam from Ascend TMS, and honestly, like it's been amazing. Like we have like feedback calls with our customers. Our customers are loving the product. Like we still have a lot to do. There are obviously some bugs. It's still a fresh product, but there's still a lot of like impact for the industry, and it's really perfect for freight brokers, and that's our audience. So it's like a match made in heaven, where we have the audience and we have the SaaS product, and it's like how do we get also how do we help our audience? Because like if we could help them land another shipper or more business, that obviously is going to be great for them. So I love how it all turned out. I don't know. It's unbelievable. But it hasn't been easy. It definitely hasn't. There's a lot of work that goes into it.
Yeah, as I say, an overnight success only takes 10 years. So what great advice, man. So I love the fact that you're continuing to try to expand your business because businesses either grow or they die. You have to continue to grow them. So great advice, Paul. Thank you so much for giving that to the Freight Nation watchers and listeners today. So Freight Nation, all right. So look, we're gonna wrap this thing up, but let me give you a few of the pro tip points here. First off, thank your mom and dad for the hard stuff. Always. All right. Make sure you thank your mom and dad for the hard stuff. Continue to learn, build relationships that you enjoy. This is all from Paul. Build relationships that you enjoy. You like doing business with him. Focus and concentrate on one thing. Do it really well because quality matters. Focus on long term relationships and don't grow too fast. Be patient with what you're doing. Take opportunities to grow because you want to do this for the long term. So, man, Paul, what great advice to the Freight Nation watchers and listeners today. Thank you so much for being on Freight Nation Day. I really appreciate you joining us.
Likewise, Brent. Thank you so much for having me. This was amazing. Love talking to you. And I look forward to interviewing you soon. We got to plan that out.
I'd be honored to be on your program. So, hey, all you introverts out there, see, man, look, introverts create great success no matter what. So you just got to kind of focus on what you're doing. But all right, Paul, thank you a lot. Let me know when you want me to be on the Freight Caviar podcast. I'd be honored to be on. And Freight Nation, don't forget, as we always say, work hard, be kind, and stay humble. We'll catch you next time, Freight Nation. Freight Nation. Freight Nation. Freight Nation. Freight Nation. Freight Nation.